It's Halloween Fest.
Halloween Fest. Welcome to the O Brother Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith.
We're coming down the home stretch here, Dan.
Mike, yes, we are. And yes, I wish we were just getting started with Halloween Fest
Yeah.
because it's starting to get chilly down here in the South. So I'm feeling it now. Tomorrow, the temps are going to drop and it's going to feel quite nice. But once again, thoroughly enjoyed this period of time on the podcast. And, we started off, Mike, with Final Destination. We then went into Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. And then we followed that up with a review of Weapons, something more current. And now we're capping off Halloween Fest this year with the Criterion review of Night of the Living Dead by George A. Romero.
Which one of us has on 4K? And shockingly, it's not me.
It's me. Yes. And and I have to say up front too. So first of all, the Criterion series on the O Brother podcast, we've got a playlist on our YouTube channel where you can go and look at the previous reviews we've done, which Mike, again, Drugstore Cowboy, Grifters, Scarface, we did an episode on. And then of course, the most recent one was Spinal Tap, right? As that was a new release. And now Night of the Living Dead, as I said. But who would have thought that I would also have these other Criterion discs? So, I never would have thought that I would have gotten back into physical media collecting. And here I am building a pretty significant collection.
And it's because in this movie that we're going to talk about, Night of the Living Dead, is just loaded with extras, and specifically extras for the Criterion release, which I got, I think, in 2017 or 18.
Right.
Because they had done interviews in 2017 just for this release.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you had time to listen to the commentaries.
A bit of one of the commentaries, and we'll get into sort of the Criterion supplements. I think let's kind of wait on that. But and real quick, Mike, again, the latest edition of the Criterion Collection at the O Brother Studios here in Florida. My Darling Clementine,
which you haven't even cracked yet.
Haven't
You'll
even
enjoy
opened it
that.
yet. I
You'll
can't
enjoy
wait.
that. Have you
It's one
ever
of my
seen
favorite films.
Tombstone?
Of course.
Okay, so you've seen this already.
Oh yeah, I did. I saw it.
Okay.
I saw it when
didn't
I
know
was
that.
in film class years ago.
Whoa.
And was really diving into films like this, John Ford, and just really kind of heavy stylized films, from directors who had a very unique sort of thumbprint or signature in their style, which again, we're going to talk about George Romero here. And it's
And
another great example.
when you think about independent films and directors, the first two that come to mind for me are always George A. Romero and John Carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the two. In fact, Night of the Living Dead was the most successful independent film up until Halloween came out.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is also, we've talked a lot on the podcast about the state of the box office and independent filmmaking. And, it's been a large part of the discussion over the last many episodes. And I really setting out to watch this film, which again is one I had not seen before.
See, I wasn't sure.
No.
And I saw it, probably it had been out for at least a decade.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw it. I don't know if you've ever experienced this or not, a drive-in theater.
Oh, I have. I have.
Okay. So was it still in Malden when you were growing up, or was that one gone?
It must have been. I mean, honestly, I don't remember. This actually might have been on one of our trips to like New Hampshire or Maine or something.
Okay.
And we would often leave the campsite because we did a lot of camping back then. We would leave the campgrounds and go to the drive-in with, everybody's parents and whatever. And you'll laugh, but my earliest memory and my really only vivid memory of being at the drive-in theater is seeing the movie The Car, which,
Right, which
of
you've
course,
talked about.
is a horror flick, and so it's ironic that that would be the case, but, but setting out to watch this, I never expected to be as captivated by it as I was, particularly after I started to do some homework on it and research on George Romero and everything. So there's so much to unpack here. And it's funny, just before we came on the air, I happened across a clip of Simon Pegg, who of
Mhm.
course did Shaun of the Dead, which we did an episode on. So go to again the Oh Brother podcast and look up the Shaun of the Dead episode. And I remember talking about George Romero at that point. And obviously that film was heavily influenced by Romero's Night of the Living Dead. And Simon Pegg talks about the fact that Romero was here in Florida
Yep,
watching a screening of that film
and
at
had no
Universal.
clue it was based on his film.
Yeah, and he said there was, like, universal security, like, making sure he didn't, like, steal the film or something. Little did he know or that person know that the film ripped off Romero's movie, you
Right,
know?
right,
So, it's kind of
and
interesting.
and I think Simon Pegg actually asked him to be in it,
I
but
think you
he
might
declined.
I think you're right, yeah, I think that's true. So, Mike, directed by George Romero, also co-wrote it with John Russo, but we should just dive right in and talk about how this film was made because I mentioned independent filmmaking and all of this. This is a perfect example of why that's so important and why we need more of this. We need to continue to promote and support independent filmmakers and those artists because these are the types of films that would get me to go back into the theater.
Yeah, and if you just watch this casually and don't pay attention to the significance of some of the things going on, you'll think, "Oh, this is a stupid, simple." It's kinda like the James Whale films, the Frankenstein and Dracula and Bride of Frankenstein. They're kinda silly, but this one isn't. In fact, not only is it pretty scary still,
Hmm.
it's think of, The Walking Dead and, Frank Darabont, who is in one of the extras, talks
Yeah.
about it's his inspiration, and he wrote a lot of the Walking Dead shows.
Yeah.
But
Here- Here's a cool image of George Romero right here that
yeah,
we've got up on screen.
and such a super smart intellectual guy.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like, you
born in New
would
York, like a Bronx born, then he goes to Pittsburgh for college to go to Carnegie Mellon, or what is now Carnegie Mellon, to study film. And you know what's interesting, Mike, too, that I discovered, and I'm sure you know this, you've heard him in interviews talk about it. One of his first jobs was working for who?
I don't remember.
He did a production called Mister Rogers Gets a Tonsillectomy.
Oh, that's right.
And as we talked about actually on the podcast before when we did I don't think we reviewed that film, but we were talking about I think what's the name of that Mister Rogers film that Tom Hanks did?
Oh god.
Because
Isn't
we
it
did
like, "Won't You Be My Neighbor" or
I think
something
it
like
is something
that?
like that, yeah, and we did A Man Called Otto, which Tom
A
Hanks is in.
Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. And, the story of as Romero tells it, anybody in that business in Pittsburgh at that time who's still working in the business got their start working on Mister Rogers' Neighborhood. Like, everybody just got involved with that
Michael
production.
Keaton,
Michael Keaton, that's right.
you
That's
know,
another one we talked
and
about,
that's
right.
where this was shot. This film was shot in Pittsburgh, and Romero and Russo were both commercial. They were producing commercials
Mhm,
and learning how to make film at the same time.
mhm.
And this is Romero's first feature film.
Which is something else we've talked about a lot too, is and a lot of times when you see like with Kubrick, for example, right? his background in photography and shooting for
Right.
magazines and things, and you often find that there's some sort of creative outlet that preceded the foray into filmmaking, and
Yeah, they wanted to be filmmakers, but to keep paying the rent. Oh, I love that picture. Dan just put up a picture of the cast, and I love it because it's in color.
right, and it's the
And man,
cast,
everyone looks different.
and you should say the cast and crew,
And
because
crew, all
you're
of them.
you're looking at both stars of the film and people who did makeup, and
Right.
it's an incredible story and a very inspiring one, that again, a film like this, some young aspiring, or maybe a young kid that's not even thinking about it right now, watches a film like this and goes, I think maybe I could do that.
Right.
Especially when you hear like the commentaries, and you said this thing is chock full. I mean, this is a cinephile's gold mine.
It
This
is.
this collection. I mean, it's got my 3 discs.
Yep.
It's got a wonderful booklet in it that is, on the back side, turns into this fantastic poster,
Yeah.
of one of the characters who is actually one of the star's daughters, that has a pretty prominent, role in the film. We won't, spoil anything, but, I think, her name is, Karen, or no, Kira or Kyra, Sean, I think is her last name, and she plays Karen in the film. But anyway, so yeah, this whole sort of, way that it got made, as you said, they've got this company that they founded called the Latent Image, and they're making these commercials for companies and corporations, and that's how they're plying their craft and getting good at it. It's
And
just
it's funny because
wild.
they in the extras, they show some of the commercials they shot. Some of them are hysterical because 'cause they're so outdated.
Mhm.
I think of the beer. There's a beer commercial. Did you see
Yeah,
that one?
Duke beer. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a his and hers mug,
Mhm.
and he's cutting the lawn, and "Why not get us a couple of beers?" And she brings out 2 mugs. Next thing you know, he sits down, he drinks them both, and she's cutting the lawn.
She's cutting the grass. Yeah, I use a natural man, and yeah, it's very,
Right, right.
very funny. But the cast here, talk a little bit about Dwayne Jones, Mike, who plays the lead character of Ben, because there's a lot to talk about here that,
A
quite
lot.
frankly, as you learn and as right out of Romero's mouth, was not planned and not intentional. If you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, and this is 1968. This film
Mhm.
comes out, and Dwayne Jones, which Dan just put a picture up now, is a black male. Now, at that time, this is the end of the civil rights movement,
Mhm.
through the 60s, and it's very violent, and leading men were not normally black unless it was a black exploitation film like Shaft or something like that.
Or you were Sidney Poitier or something. Yeah.
Exactly. Guess who's coming to dinner? Something,
Mhm.
that requires. And he wasn't the original person cast, but when he came in and read, Romero and his partner were like, "Yeah, this guy's the guy." And now they say they didn't base it on color and that it had nothing to do with it, but you have to wonder if the subconscious did, because it was a significant thing, kind of ruined his life in a way. There's not a lot from Dwayne Jones on the extras. There's an interview,
Yes.
but in the interview, he talks about never seeing George Romero's other films, not talking to him.
There is a clip of him, of Dwayne, a video clip of him speaking about it very briefly. And in it, once again, he also supports the fact that that was not intentional. It wasn't
Right.
really, they didn't set out to make this sociological, political statement in the film.
But he also talks about a story of him being driven home because he lived in the Pittsburgh area,
You talking about
and
Dwayne Jones?
Dwayne Jones,
Yeah.
and somebody used to drive him home every night after shooting.
Hmm.
And there was one night, it was usually a guy that drove him, but this one night, one of the female members of the cast drove him home. And ironically, in the film, he uses a tire iron.
Mhm.
Well, they're in fear for their lives being followed by a group of kind of hooligans with tire irons just because it was a white woman driving a black man. And that's what it was
Mhm.
like in the 60s, late 60s.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't really talk about the film without that kind of backdrop to it, and there's
Right.
a you know, there's a famous story of Romero talking about how they're on their way to basically attempt to sell the film to distributors when they learn of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. on
Correct.
April 4th, 1968. And so immediately, like it or not, the film is going to take on a totally different significance at that point. So,
And luckily, Dwayne Jones, such a talented guy, and
mhm,
you see it in every frame.
mhm.
He changed the tone of the character. Like I said, it wasn't written for him, and it was written much more angry. And he took, although there's some of it still in, he took a
Yes.
lot of that. Like there's this one monologue. We
Mhm.
should probably set up the film. You know,
Yeah.
we're deep
Well,
into this. We haven't set it up.
Night of the Living Dead almost speaks
Speaks
for
for
itself,
itself.
but give the very quick setup.
Basically, people, it opens in a graveyard where there's this couple visiting a grave, and all of a
And
sudden, go
and let
ahead.
me just say, do you remember, Mike, when I was talking to you about Blazing Saddles? I had not seen Blazing Saddles, and I finally had watched Blazing Saddles, and there was an audio clip from a scene in that movie towards the end where the main character is like, "Oop, hold your ears, folks. It's showtime," right?
Yeah.
And that was the opening of a radio show that we've listened to in the Orlando area for years and years and years. Well, this was another example watching Night of the Living Dead. I'm going to play a very, very quick clip. I knew this audio clip, but I had no idea the reference of what it was from
Till you saw it.
until I saw the film.
Coming to get you, Barbara.
It's
The
so
famous
classic.
"Coming
Yeah.
to get you, Barbara."
W
He's joking.
Right, and that's Russell Streiner, who again, it plays this character Johnny in the film, but he's also a producer, and he's on the
Right.
set, and he's one of the crew. So another example.
So they're in, him and his, I don't know if it was his wife or girlfriend, Judy, are
Mhm,
in a graveyard. All of a sudden, this ghoul, and I say ghoul because the word zombie is never used in the film,
mhm.
even though people describe it as a zombie film. And uh, in some countries, the title is, Night of the Zombies or whatever. But yeah, there's the shot of them, and they're looking at a guy who's basically dead, but has come back to life. And they kind of hint about this radiation in the
From
area that's
e
causing dead people to come back to life, although they
Right.
never come to a conclusion on that's how this starts.
Yeah, it is hinted at in a couple of different, sections of the film. Yeah, I think it was like a satellite that was going to probe Venus's atmosphere or
Correct.
something, and so right. So, which was interesting that they even had that kind of hinted at in the background. But one thing before we move on from this image, I want to talk about because as I'm watching this film, and there's a great supplement on one of the discs that really talks about the use of light and shadows
Right.
in the making of, and it's very kind of Orson Wellesian, to coin a phrase with some of if you think of just Citizen Kane and some of the other Wells films, dare I say that there are some shots in this film, and actually some of the things that Romero did to get some of these shots that kind of harken back to and influenced by Wells. But anyways, this image here you see as you mentioned is Barbara and then her husband in the film. And what was masterful about this is they were afraid that there's a sequence later when he comes back as one of the dead,
Right.
and they were afraid that the audience wouldn't
Remember
recognize
him.
who it
Yes.
was. They're like, "Well, he's not Robert Redford, Russell isn't, so they might not remember him." So they kind of foreshadow it by his character in this graveyard scene, he goes back to the car at one point and puts on these driving gloves. As you can see here, he's wearing one of these black leather gloves.
Yep.
And then you fast forward to the sequence where he's a quote unquote zombie. I mean, that
And there
is
you see the glove. That's him reaching in the window.
fantastic.
And she says his name, but
Mm-hmm.
chances are, see, he doesn't have the glasses on.
Right.
So chances are you might not have remembered him from the opening shot.
Well, I didn't.
Oh, really?
I
Because
didn't. It wasn't
the
until
glove worked with me.
it didn't work for me. Right.
Wow.
So again, I thought it was just a great device that they utilized to kind of tie those two together. It was pretty brilliant.
And, all the problems that happen on independent films, like
Mhm.
there's a sequence where Ben, Dwayne Jones, is dragging a corpse upstairs,
Mhm.
like moving it. That corpse never comes back to life. They show that sequence, they go back to the main room, and, it's never alluded to again.
Mike
So,
referring to plot holes in Night of the
yeah,
Living
plot
Dead.
holes in it, and they also there was a basement, a lot of basement sequences,
Mhm.
which this house, which was gonna be demolished, so it was perfect for them,
Mhm.
didn't have a basement or a typical basement. There was no stairway, so they had to kind of creatively invent a door that went
Right.
to the basement, and then they shot the stairway in the basement at their offices.
Mhm.
So it's
Right.
remarkably clever. Something you'd never know unless you watch the extras, or you wouldn't pick up on it.
One thing we talked about when we did highest to lowest, the Spike Lee joint, which was, of course, kind of a retelling of the Akira Kurosawa film, was we talked a lot about blocking.
Mhm.
And, this is just one of many, many, many examples in Night of the Living Dead of the way that Romero would frame a scene and position the characters, and which, led to, as he talks about, a lot of these mistakes. Like when he sees the film or saw the film after the fact many years later, all he could focus on was the mistakes, because you'd have like Ben, for example, would have the tire iron, as you mentioned, and he goes to whack a zombie with it or a ghoul with it in one direction, and then they cut and he's actually coming at him from the other direction,
Yeah.
and things like that that most of the
Even
casual viewers wouldn't notice. But
even the shot you have up, the
Mhm.
guy behind him, the older
Yes,
guy that's kinda balding, has a
right.
bruise for most of the on his forehead, and I think this shot, he's got it, and then he doesn't.
Yeah, and it's funny, that's Carl Hardman, who he and his wife, again, they both star in it. They star as a married couple in the film.
Yeah,
No, I'm sorry, they weren't married, they were partners
right.
in Hardman Enterprises or whatever, and
Yeah,
they,
some business,
yeah, as we
yes,
said earlier, were doing makeup on the ghouls and
correct.
everything, and,
And he was making, like, there's one sequence where there's a skeleton,
uh-huh.
and I guess he was really good with clay, 'cause
Mhm,
he made it out of clay, and there's sometimes you'll see a hand
mhm.
coming in that's like a dead hand, and it's made out of clay, and he
Yeah,
did it.
yeah, and he's also another producer on the film as well. You had mentioned this, scene, I wanted to play a clip of this scene with, between Ben and, Barbara, that was, quite striking, to see. If you think again about 1968, the now, racial overtones, if you will, of the
Right.
film, but to see something like this.
He grabbed me.
And so Barbara's kind of going hysterical here in
She's
this sequence.
hysterical.
Yeah, and
Please,
so
don't you hear me?
they're having this
We
kind
have
of encounter.
Don't you know what's going on out there? This is no Sunday school picnic.
Don't you understand? My brother is alone.
Your brother is dead.
No, my brother is not dead. Oh. Oh.
Okay, so a man hitting a woman, a black man hitting a white woman,
Very
a
controversial.
lot going on there for
And
sure.
Dwayne Jones, like the nicest, sweetest guy, doesn't wanna do it, but
Mhm.
they need to, and something that scene also pointed out, it was Johnny, the glove wearer, there,
Mhm.
that's her brother. We called them a
I'm
couple.
sorry, that's right, the brother.
It's the
That's right.
brother.
Yes,
But
right.
that sequence, they needed her unconscious for a good chunk of the film, and that was the only way to really do it,
Right.
was to have him kind of belt her. She's
Yeah.
hysterical, and but he also has confrontations with the guy. Like, he takes charge
Mhm.
where normally it would be the white male taking charge.
Yeah, and here's a sequence that you're talking about in the film.
Well, if there were more, the racket sounded like the place was being ripped apart. How were we supposed to know what was going on?
Now, wait a minute. You just got finished saying you couldn't hear from down there. Now you say it sounded like the place was being ripped apart. It would be nice if you get your story straight, man.
All right, now you tell me. I'm not going to take that kind of a chance when we got a safe place. We luck into a safe place, and you're telling us we got to risk our lives just because somebody might need help, huh?
Yeah, something like that.
And ironically, he was right. The safest place was the basement,
That's
as
right.
we find out as the movie goes on.
Well, yes and no. You could argue maybe either way on that if you think long and hard about what occurs in the basement.
True.
But we
True.
won't give away any of those spoilers. Um, the it makes you think again. This is really, Mike, what sets off this whole what do you call it? All these other films, right? That would they're not copycats because I think a lot of them were paying tribute or homage to what Romero started with Night of the Living Dead. But I told you I just had watched 28 Years Later, which I'm not going to comment on that film tonight. Might have more to say on that on a future episode. But World War Z, the Walking Dead TV series, Train to Busan. What was
Shaun of the
weird?
Dead.
Shaun of the Dead. I even was thinking of things like 12 Angry Men. There was these, because again, the people that are trapped in this confined space and they're all kind of arguing whose opinion is better about, how to solve this problem and how to stay safe and things like that. I mentioned the references to Orson Welles, and actually, I think I had a shot of. Yeah, here's a shot of from the making of Citizen Kane, like the famous image of Welles in the floor. He couldn't get the camera low enough for the shot, so
Right.
he rips out the part of the floor and sets the camera in there. And I felt like, Romero was doing a lot of those kinds of techniques. It's kind of
Well,
what do you
interesting, because the way this is filmed,
yeah,
they filmed it in 35 millimeter.
right.
And in order in those days to get sound, you needed something called a blimp,
Yes.
encases the camera,
Right.
and the blimp alone weighs like 75 pounds.
Mhm.
So they can't be moving quickly with the blimp. So they have to take the blimp off and shoot. So there's a lot of sequences where there's no dialogue. And or if they needed dialogue, they'd have to add it later,
Mhm.
because otherwise they were stuck with this huge, and there were no dolly tracks that we know of today and things like that they move cameras around
No,
with
it was either Romero walking around with the handheld or it was on a tripod. It was one
on
or
a
the other.
tripod.
And they
Correct.
talk about you could either like tilt the camera up, you could pan from left to right. Like you didn't have a lot of options. But again, I think that's what lends itself to the film being just so stylistic and so intriguing visually, you know?
And, even, things like squibs weren't
Mhm.
really well known at the time. They were used, but they
Yeah,
talk about, like, they didn't even know what the hell they were doing. They'd
right.
be putting squibs on people's head and trying to cover it in makeup,
Mhm.
but it works. All of it works.
I was surprised that, and we should say this, for those that are wondering who might have, younger kids or whatever, like there are some violent sequences for sure. And I was very surprised. There's this very brief nudity scene that kind of came out of left field.
And they don't comment about it on the commentary.
No, and there's one ghoul and the entire lot of ghouls throughout the film who's completely naked. It's just kind of odd.
It's very odd, and there's no decay. It's just a nude woman walking
nude
with
woman.
the ghouls.
Yeah, so weird. You had talked about, again, think about 1968. This is not something that people had really seen on screen, and mentioned it's quite scary even today in a lot of spots. And this is a good. Now, Mike, what do you figure this is? This is an image of one of the quote unquote flesh eaters, which was actually one of the original. That was the original title of the film, Night of the Flesh Eaters.
Correct.
And do you want to tell the story of why it was no longer the Night of the
Well,
Flesh
there was a
Eaters?
movie already called Flesh Eaters, so they couldn't use it, had to pivot. I think there was another name, and then they wound up with Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, it was Night of Anubis,
Okay.
which was so obscure they figured nobody's going to use this title. So much so that even the distributor ended up not wanting to use that title. And as you said, they come up with Night of the Living Dead. But this sequence here of one of the flesh eaters, gnawing on someone's hand,
Right.
it's pretty
And-
nasty.
And depending on, who it was, like some of them, they had like literally sheep intestines and all sorts of nasty stuff. Some people, like when a camera goes on you, and I know this firsthand, you'll do almost anything. I think of Nick Cage, one of the movies he was in where he ate a cockroach.
Mm.
And you could tell it was real. It was moving. He grabs it. He starts crunching it.
Mm-hmm.
But in some cases, they were chewing on silly putty. In other cases, they were actually chewing on the intestines, maybe covered with Bosco chocolate syrup.
Yes.
But there were, it is pretty graphic. And even Roger Ebert, way back in the day,
Yeah.
talked about his concern because there was no rating system when
The
this came out.
MPAA. Yeah.
It literally, the rating system that we know today, PG, R, X, I don't think exists anymore, but it came out the following month or 2 months, very soon after.
Mhm.
And I don't know if this was the reason, but
Yeah. Well, and as I said, there's a very graphic sequence towards the latter part of the film. So just, kind of a heads up for those that would want to be interested in knowing that. This is another one of my favorite shots, Mike, in the film that the Romero gets. There's this music box that Barbara is looking at
yes,
in a bedroom, and he just does this awesome here. Let me blow it up here a little bit. There we go. And the camera pushes in, and this music box, it has like all these different doors that kind of open up, so you can see through it to the other side. And all of a sudden the shot is just looking through the music box into onto her face. It's just such a brilliant
it's a great shot.
It's a wonderful shot. Yeah.
A lot of people comment about that specific shot.
Yeah.
And they,
Yeah.
Throughout the commentary, they're talking about, oh, I have this pitchfork, I have
From the film.
and they couldn't figure out who had the music box.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Talk about Mike Romero's use of library music. And
Yeah,
the
like they
significance
didn't
there.
have any budget,
Yeah.
so they use what's called stock footage. And music after 69 years, it goes into the public domain.
Right.
And it's different, like Mickey Mouse. They just lost the exclusive rights to the Mickey Mouse character. So that's now in the public domain, meaning me and
Screamboat,
you could make our own Mickey Mouse film.
Screamboat Willie.
Yeah, and not worry about being sued.
Right.
Also, the chess game. Do you know about the chess game?
No.
Okay, the sound effects, they really couldn't afford it. So I think it was Russo sat down with the guy that was doing the sound effects, and they played a game of chess. If Russo wins, it's free. If the other guy wins, they have to pay double.
Mm.
And Romero's like, we didn't even have the money to pay. Thank God Russo won that chess game.
I didn't hear that. That's a great story. But yeah, I remember I thought I might still have it in my vinyl collection. These old records they would put out, nothing but sound effects,
Yes.
which again made you feel at that time like, oh, I can make my own films. Now, you were usually at that time, you were recording things onto a tape recorder. There wasn't really the video element to it as pervasively as we have now, but those it made me think of those sound effect records that used to be out. We talked about, this was one thing that stood out to me was there's these news reports going on throughout the film,
Yeah.
and I really felt. I mean, there were times I'm like, is this real footage? Like the way it was shot was so brilliant and really added a feeling of legitimacy to the film, I thought. Didn't you think?
Absolutely. And back then newsreels were
Mhm.
the thing. Like when you would go to a theater, they would show a newsreel. And you talk about Orson Welles, right?
Right.
It's famous in Citizen Kane. And they were concerned because some of these guys were real journalists. They were real news guys.
Yeah.
They just wanted to be in the movie. And the concern, and again, thinking of Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, where people turned that on and thought it was really happening, they were afraid that, this might come on TV and people would see this newsreel and think, oh my God, people are
Mhm.
coming back from the dead. There's another story, Dan, I don't know if you came across, where there was a tornado. The opening shot in that cemetery,
Mhm.
there was a tornado a year or two later that unearthed like 200 bodies.
Yes, I heard that on the commentary.
How creepy
Um,
is that?
yeah, Marilyn Eastman, who plays Helen, the character, Mr. Cooper's wife,
Yeah.
and they obviously have a strain in their marriage,
Oh,
clearly
yeah.
in the film. She talks about that on the commentary. Well, actually, it was Carl Hardman who mentions it. She actually hadn't heard of that story, but yeah, he talked about the tornadoes and it tore away all the trees that were in the cemetery. It's a very beautiful kind of location, and even though it was within a cemetery, but yeah, that's a wild story as well. But Romero died in 2017. Another feature on this Criterion Collection is a great interview with him at the Toronto Film Festival. He's being interviewed, and he gives a little bit of a Q&A as well. It's maybe, I don't know, 30 minutes or so, something, but
Yeah.
I think that was just a few years before he passed away. But a lot of good insights from him in that interview. And to talk about the extras a little bit more, Mike, there's so many great interviews. You said there's two audio commentaries on the film. There's endless features. I mean, they have the original 16 millimeter work print
Yeah.
of the film.
They have
If
dailies, which if you
dailies,
don't know what dailies are, never heard that term,
yeah,
used to be at the end of the day, a
mhm,
director would look at footage through the camera to make sure they got everything. Today, those dailies go to the executives and they look at them and say, hey, we don't like this. We don't like this. A famous one is Al Pacino in The Godfather. Every day he expected to be fired, and the
mhm.
daily came in when he shot Sollozzo and the cop, and they said, "Okay,
M-
we'll stick
M-
with him."
McCluskey.
McCluskey, yeah,
Yeah,
that
I
Sterling Hayden.
Sterling Hayden. There you go. That's right. The killing, right?
Yep, Stanley
Yeah.
Kubrick.
There's a great Tom Schneider interview with George Romero.
That's one of my favorite extras. It shows how articulate Romero and the guy, yeah, they're smoking,
They're all
and
smoking. It was
Tom
another thing.
Snyder always smoked on the
Always
Today
smoked.
Show
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
Tomorrow Show.
Right.
And I forget his name. He did the film, the
Fan-
Phantasm film,
right. Right.
but it showed how ignorant Tom Snyder sometimes was. He didn't see the films. He really didn't know much about the genre. He wouldn't even say horror because he
Yeah.
was afraid it sounded like whore.
That's that's right. That's right. Yeah, I think, it was weird. Tom Schneider grew on me over the years. I really could not stand him early on, but he did grow on me. He seemed like a very sweet guy.
Yeah.
But what you say there, though, I kind of found it. I found that made for a more interesting interview because he was, as opposed to like Bob Costas, who we both loved as an interviewer. He had a great show on many many years ago, just a one-on-one format.
Yeah.
But he was very studied about
Right.
whoever the subject was or the guest was, whereas Schneider, as you said, just kind of would riff
He would
sometimes.
wing it.
But it was more like you and I being there as like a fan and maybe not necessarily, or not even a fan, but just someone who's genuinely interested in learning more about this person and their work. And I thought it was
And
pretty cool.
ironically, Dawn of the Dead had just come out, which
Yeah.
is technically the sequel to this movie, even though there's no continuity
Yeah.
between the two films. But it's always been called the sequel. I didn't know if you knew there's a remake, Night of the Living Dead.
Well, interestingly, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, somebody we just spoke about
Correct.
In our Final Destination episode, Tony Todd is
He's the
Ben.
star. Yep.
That's incredible. Rest in peace. I just can't say enough about this film, but in particular, if you haven't seen it or if you've seen it and you're looking to pick it up because you don't own it, this is absolutely, undoubtedly the only way to own this film is the Criterion Collection
It's
of Night of the Living
loaded.
Dead. It is absolutely
I
spectacular.
mean, you could spend a good week, which I
Yeah.
did.
I mean,
I
it's
watched this over the course of a week.
it's literally thicker because there's so much in there with the 3
Yeah.
discs and the booklet and everything. So, yeah, I strongly encourage. Now, look, we should say these are not, these are not the cheapest discs you can
No,
buy, but
but twice a year they're 50% off.
here we go.
And like you still need to get Citizen Kane, I think, in your collection. So
Yes,
when the 50% off sale comes, I'll be screaming at you
I'm there. Yeah,
because
but this,
that's a must.
yeah, this is one you've got to have. I really didn't expect. I liked it even more. Excuse me, after diving into
Yeah.
many of the extras. Pretty much, I've seen every extra with the exception of listening to both commentaries in full. So I've still got a lot to dive, which just goes to show you there's plenty here to sink
A
your teeth
lot
into.
to
So
digest. And as you
yep,
say, it's so educational.
it is.
Like, I've taught film appreciation in college several times, and it would be easy for me to just put in a disc and put on a commentary track
Hmm.
and, hey, class one done.
Yeah.
But, you know,
In fact, that's what a lot of you students ended up doing. They just
probably
they
to
tuned out
write
and
their
they put on their own.
papers,
Yeah.
but, basically when you pick up a Criterion disc, it's an education of that film.
Hmm.
And this one, you could watch this film on its own and say, "Oh, that's like old garbage." But as you realize what they went through, whether it
Hmm.
was lighting flames or eating flesh or, figuring out where to put the camera, this thing is just an education in filmmaking by one of the
Yeah.
great independent filmmakers.
And it again, it has me kind of, ringing the bell to say, let's figure out some way to get a space dedicated in our theaters to films like this. Not
Yeah.
just these classic independent films, if you will, but again, current independent filmmakers that are trying to get their work seen. I think there's a place for that.
Yeah, and there's a struggle and they wind up jumping to Netflix in a week,
Right.
and you don't get that experience of the crowd, which we
Yeah.
talked about with Weapons, how the
That's
crowd experience made it better.
right, and who knows more about the appreciation of the communal experience than Mike and Dan on the Over the podcast? I mean, huge fans of the communal experience, but
You'll never hear me talking about a guy eating a hot dog sideways or,
never,
chomping
no,
a pizza
yeah,
without slicing it.
yeah. Don't go back to any of the state of the box office blogs or videos that we've done in podcast episodes on that because you may hear something along those lines. So, Mike, before we head out, please, for those that are not already subscribed to the Oh Brother podcast on YouTube, there's a QR code right above our heads where you can just take your phone, boop, scan the QR code, take you right to the YouTube channel, and you can hit subscribe.
Subscribe.
Bing, easy like that. We are on all podcast platforms. So if you prefer to consume your Oh Brother podcasts in the audio form, we're on every single podcast player you can think of: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio,
And it's always
whatever it is.
fascinating because people don't do those in order. And to see
Right.
what people are playing,
Yeah,
I'm always fascinated by that.
Mike loves that when he sees like somebody just downloaded, the review of Onward,
Yeah.
some random
Or
film.
Solo. Why you should love Solo.
Well, and we should say there's such an enormous library of episodes, and we're not keeping them all behind a paywall, but we do offer early access to new episodes. So if you're not currently a subscriber to the Oh Brother podcast, the audio podcast, in the show notes for the audio podcast, there's a link right there to support the show. It would help us continue to do what we're doing, which isn't cheap, folks, but we're dedicated. We bring the good news to you each and every week. But it really would help us out. And it gets you early access to any of the new episodes. You get those, days in advance of everybody else. So that would be greatly appreciated if you would consider, dropping a few shekels and hit that subscribe button there too. And then also leave us a review on the audio podcast. You Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can go in and leave a review and kind of a 5-star there rating. That helps to kind of get it swept up in the algorithms and all that kind of stuff. And we'd appreciate that as well. Mike, anything else to say about Night of the Living Dead, the Criterion edition?
No, the final thing I'll say is Entertainment Weekly, when they were a big deal, listed the 100 scariest films, and this was 13th. Pretty damn good for 1968.
I would say so, considering the number of films in the genre that now exists, which is why, Mike, we bring you Oh Brother Halloween Fest every single season.
And I'm so bummed it's ending. Although, we've watched 4 films this Halloween. For every film we've watched, I've watched 3 other horror films, whether it's Vincent Price.
Yeah. And we've been doing this for many years. So if you go onto the Oh Brother YouTube channel, you'll see that there's a playlist of all of our horror genre reviews. So, definitely check that out. Mike started with, I didn't give you any love or acknowledgement. You've got the nice Friday the 13th
because
shirt.
I started with Mike Myers, the Mikey shirt.
Good book.
I figured I'd end with Friday the 13th. And
That's
we still have a few days to catch a few more horror films like The Tingler.
We do. The Tingler.
By Vincent Price.
Oh, The Tingler. I was thinking of The Grabber for Black Phone 2. You had me thinking of. But Mike, sadly, that's going to do it for this season of Halloween Fest on the Oh Brother podcast. But it is not the end of the Oh Brother podcast. We will be back with more regular episodes every single week. We'll be coming at you. But we appreciate all the support through this Halloween Fest. And Mike, I think it's time to say goodbye to all the ghouls and gals. And that's going to do it for another episode of the Oh Brother podcast. I've been your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, of course, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith. And we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Happy birthday, Mom.